Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We welcome to Online Teaching Academy Ekaliva, Standard 11, Subject Biology. In the last class, we have studied about the description of a flower, where we have studied about the 4 different types of whorls like Calyx, Corolla, Gynacium and Gynacium. Here we are going to see about the floral diagram and the floral formula. What is floral diagram? It is nothing but to explain the salient features of a flower with either the letters or by the numbers. You call it as a floral formula, and with the help of the floral formula we can draw the floral diagram. So what is a floral formula? Floral formula is nothing but, it is a simple way to explain the salient features of a flower. And here when you talk about the axis, we all have studied that if you say that this is the axis, if we say that this is the axis on which you will find that this is the flower which has been born, and this you call as a mother axis. This side which is facing the mother axis, you call this side as posterior side, and this side which is away from the mother axis, we will call it as anterior side. So the side of the flower facing the mother axis, so we said this is the axis on which we will find that the flower has been born with the pedicel. This we call it as a pedicel, and this is the calyx and the corolla. So the side which is facing to the mother axis, we call it as a posterior side, and the opposite side is what we call it as a anterior side. We said that the floral formula is nothing but, we represent the description of the flower with the help of certain alphabets. That is what we call it as a floral formula. Now, when we were talking about the flower, we said that this is the mother axis, and here the flower has been born. We said this is the pedicel, or you talk about a pedicel here, this is the calyx and the corolla. And here a small leaf like structures which is there, what we call them as bract, and that can be represented with letters BR. If a flower is having a bract, then you call it as a bracteate flower. Then we will represent with letters BR. If the flower doesn't have bracts, then we call it as ebracteate, and the way we represent is EBR. And we already said that sometimes in some of the flowers, we may find a leaf-like structures in between the flower and the bract, and these are called as bracteoles. And if a flower is having a bracteoles, we will represent with BRL, and the flower is called as bracteolate flower. If the flower doesn't have bracteoles, we call it as ebracteolate. So if the flower is having a bract, we call it as bracteate. If it doesn't have bracts, we call it as ebracteate. If they have bracteoles, you call it as bracteolate. If they don't have, we call it as ebracteolate. And when we talk about the symmetry, we said that either the flower can be divided into equal halves, 2 equal halves at any plane, then you call it as actinomorphic flower, we call it as. If we can cut the flower into 2 equal halves at only one plane, we call it as zygomorphic. If we are not able to cut the flower in any angle or any plane, then we call it as asymmetric flower, we call it as. And if a flower is actinomorphic, then this is the symbol which we use for actinomorphic. And if it is zygomorphic, we put percentage. This is zygomorphic. And if it is asymmetric, you will represent like this. So, for the symmetry, either actinomorphic, you can find this is the symbol, the formula which we use, a circle with plus. If it is zygomorphic, it is the percentage. If it is asymmetric, this is the formula. And then, when we talk about the sex of the flower, whether we were saying that either it may be unisexual or bisexual. So, if a flower is having only the male part, that is staminate, stamen alone is present, then you call that flower as a staminate flower. And we represent with this. This is a staminate flower. If you can find this formula, then you will say that the flower is staminate. If it is pistillate, we know what is pistillate. Pistil is the female part of the flower, or we call it as a carpel. And if it is pistillate, you will find this is a pistillate flower. And sometimes we say the flower may be bisexual. In that case, you will find that both, if it is added, that is a circle, a staminate flower and pistillate. So, this is what we call it as a bisexual flower. Then, when we come to the next word, what you talk about the calyx. Calyx is represented by the letter K. So, calyx we represent with the letter K. And here when we were talking about, we said that the sepals may be, either they may be united or they may be free. So, if they are united, we use a term called as synsepalous, or we use another word, what we call it as gamosepalous. And if they are free, either we call it as polysepalous or aposepalous. So, K is the formula which we use for calyx. And how many are there in the world, the number? We said that the number may vary from one flower to another. So, if you say that the calyx only 5 are there, then we write K, and the number what we represent is 5 here. So, how many sepals are there? 5 sepals are there in number. And whether they are fused or whether they are free, how are we going to represent? If they are fused, you are going to put this inside the bracket. Then you call it as gamosepalous or synsepalous. So, if we put the number inside the bracket there, we call that condition as synsepalous or gamosepalous. If you don't put any symbol here, only the K calyx and 5 means it is understood that the sepals are free. What we call it as aposepalous, or you use a term called as poly. Then the next word is Corolla. Corolla is represented with a letter C. Calyx K, Corolla C. Again, it is the same thing which we follow. Either if the corolla is 5, you will put 5. If it is only 4, 4. If it is a trimerous flower, you will put 3. So, the number, how many petals are there, that number. If they are fused, you will put inside the bracket. If they are free, you leave like the C, 5. Then, the next word is androecium. So, here you talk about androecium. A is the letter through which we represent, and then the number, how many are there? So, we are going to represent either 3 or it may be 2 plus 2, or sometimes we were talking about, we have seen that papilionaceous corolla, the Sankapu what we were talking about. So, this is the thing. Here in this you will find that the androecium is 9 plus 1. 9 will form as a 9 forming a single bundle, and 1 stamen is free. So, here in Clitoria or Pisum sativum you will find 9 forming as 1 bundle. So, you have put 9 inside the bracket and 1 is free there. So, you have put 1. This is didelphous stamen, and if the number is more, then you will represent as infinite number. So, either it may be 2, 4 or it may be fused, you will put inside the bracket. If they are free, you will leave like that, and then if it is more than the number, then you will put infinite number. Now, sometimes what will happen, the androecium is attached to the corolla. Then you said that condition as Epipetales we have said. For example, in Datura metal you will find, this is the flower, here what you talk about, here you will find that the androecium is attached to the petal. Then you call that condition as Epipetales. How are we going to represent this condition? You will put Corolla, whatever number it is, you will put 5, and androecium, how many are there? 5 are there, and they are attached to the corolla. So you will find C5, androecium 5, and they are attached, and this is what we call it as Epipetales condition. So Epipetales, if you have to represent, we will represent like this. And then sometimes we said that they may be sterile stamens. In that case, you are going to represent staminodes in degree. A you will put alphabet androecium, and degree if you add here, then it becomes staminode. That is, what is a staminode? Staminode is nothing but the sterile stamen. The next part is the of the flower is what we call it as a gynacium or pistil, and this gynacium or pistil is represented with a letter called as G. And here again it may be, how many carpels are there? The number may vary from one flower to another, and that number we are going to put, if the carpels are 2, you are going to put 2, and you don't do anything, then it is understood it is apocarpus, that is the carpels are free. If the carpels are fused, then you will represent with, this is gynacium, and how many are there carpels? 3 are there, it is called as tricarpellary, and if you put them inside the bracket, is understood it is syncarpus condition. So you will find gynacium, tricarpellary, inside the bracket it is syncarpus. And again the same if it is pistillode. A pistillode is nothing but the sterile carpel G, and a degree if you put, it is a pistillode. Here, if the gynacium is superior, that is the ovary is superior and all the floral pads are below, then you call it as a superior ovary. And how are we going to represent this superior ovary? If you draw a line under G, so if you are put G as gynacium, if it is superior ovary, you are going to draw the line below the G, then you call that as a superior. And then inferior ovary, we are going to draw G, above G if you put, then it is a inferior ovary, and if it is in between, it is half inferior. So here all these are the abbreviations which we use if we have to write the description of a flower with a formula. We will see some of the floral formulas here with the floral diagram. Now, this is one floral diagram where you will find with the floral formula we will see that. We said BR is what? Bracteate, so the flower is bracteate, and bracteoles are also there, so we are representing with BRL. Then what is this symbol? This symbol represents actinomorphic, that is you can cut the flower into 2 equal halves at any plane. So if you say that, now you can cut this flower into 2 equal halves at this plane, either you can cut this side or this side or this side, then you call it as what? Actinomorphic. So this is the symbol what we represent for actinomorphic, and this is bisexual. So and this is calyx, we represent with K, and what is the number here? 5, and we said if we put them inside the bracket, it is fused condition. Here corolla, how many are there? 5 are there, and this 5, it is free. So we represent, we don't put that anywhere. And A is what? Here we said that if the anthers are attached to the corolla, we call it as epipetales stamens. So you will find that it is there, you will find an arrow mark above joining A and C. And what is the number here? It is infinite number, and all the stamens, if they are fused, what you call it as monodelphous stamens, you will call it as. In Hibiscus rosa sinensis, you will find that this is the calyx, then you said this is the corolla, and here you will find this is the staminal tube on which you will find anthers, you will find this is the androecium, and here you will find stigma. Okay. And here if you see that all the anthers are there on a staminal tube, and this condition you call it as how many number are there? There are more in number, so we are representing with infinite number, and all the anthers are there on one tube, so you call this as monoadelphous. What do we call it as? Monoadelphous stamen. So infinite number and they are fused as one, so you put inside the bracket, and this is G, gynaecium. How many are there? 5 are there, pentacarpillary, and all these are fused, so you call it as syncarpus. And if we draw the line below, it is understood it is superior ovary. So with this floral formula, you can see the floral diagram. And what is this? This dot, whatever we are representing, is nothing but, this is what we call it as mother axis. This is the mother axis. So we said, if you say that this is the axis on which the flower is being born, you said this side is the one which is facing is the posterior. So this is the mother axis. And how many are there? Here you talk about, this is the bract, this is the wall what you are talking about, this is the bract, and these are bracteoles. We said if they have a bract, a flower is having a bract, you are representing with BR. If the other whorl, if it is there, then you call it as bracteoles. You said these are the bracts, and here if it is there, we call it as a bracteoles. So this flower is having a bract, you have represented here, and bracteoles. Sometimes how many number are there, that number also can be represented there. Then you said this is a symmetry, so actinomorphic, you can cut the flower into 2 equal halves more than 2 planes. And this bisexual, that is you will find androecium, and we also find gynaecium. So we will find this as a bisexual flower. Now this whorl is only what we call it as a calyx, and this calyx, what is the number here? 5. So 5 are there. So you will find 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. So 5 are there, 5 calyx are there, and this calyx is fused. So either completely fused or partially fused. So here you will find they are joined together, so that is they are fused. So calyx 5, and this calyx when you represent, it is an odd number, and this odd sepal, if you have drawn here near to the mother axis, then we say that, we already said that the flower facing towards the mother axis is what we call it as posterior, and the other side you call it as anterior. So here you will find that this odd sepal is posterior in position, that is it is facing to the mother axis. So you have drawn the odd sepal close to the mother axis. So this is the odd sepal which is posterior. Then the next one is corolla. How many are there? 5 are there. So here you can see this is 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Again, when we were talking about the arrangement of calyx and corolla, we said that study is what we call it as estivation. So here you will find this calyx, you will find they don't overlap. These ends are not overlapping each other. So you call the calyx is valvate estivation. Here the corolla, you can see that these are the ends. This end overlaps with this. This end is overlapping with this. So this kind of estivation we call it as twisted estivation, you will call it as. So here you will find this is in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. So how many are there? 5. And this is what we call it as epipetales. That is, the anthers are attached to the petals. So you will find above line there, how many are there? Many are there. So you will put as infinite, and all are forming as a single bundle. So you have put as monodelphous. And gynacium, 5 are there. So here you will find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So pentacarpellary, and all these carpels are fused 5. So you will put inside the bracket, and this gynaecium, you will find that the gynaecium is above and these floral parts are below. So you call that kind of arrangement as superior ovary. So you have drawn the line below. So with this floral formula and the diagram, you can describe the flower. Now here we have seen a bisexual flower. Now one example with unisexual flower we will see. Now if you see this floral formula, you can find bract. Bract is, the flower is a bracteolate flower. So bract, ebracteolate. So you can find this is the bract which is there. There is no bracteole, so it is ebracteolate, and it is actinomorphic. Actinomorphic means you can cut into 2 equal halves in many planes. And then this is male flower and this is the female flower. So we said a male flower is a staminate flower. Sir, how are we going to represent? We are going to represent with a circle and an arrow mark above, then it becomes staminate flower. So this is the male flower. And we said that if we are not able to differentiate the calyx and corolla, you call that whorl as a perianth. That is the perianth, and each member of the perianth you call it as a tepal. So here you will find P is the representation for perianth, and here how many are there? They are there, the perianth is there in 2 whorls of 3 plus 3. So you will find 1, 2, 3, and these are the 3. So 2 whorls of 3. So we are represented with 3 plus 3, and because we said it is a staminate flower, it is androecium. So here you will find these are the anthers which are there. How many are there? 3 are there, and the anthers are fused. So you call it as syn. So you have put inside the bracket, and this represents dithecus. And gynaecium, there is no gynaecium because it is a staminate flower. We are representing with 0. Now this is a female flower, and this female flower you can represent here again. This is the bract, and there are no bracteoles, so it is ebracteolate, EBRL. And again you can cut this flower into equal halves in more than 2 planes. You call it as actinomorphic, and it is the pistillate flower. So you are going to represent with this. Then perianth, 3 of the outer whorl and 3 of the inner whorl. So 3 plus 3. And androecium, because it is the pistillate flower, there is no androecium. So we are representing with 0. Then when it comes to the gynaecium, G is the letter, and this is the superior ovary. So you have underlined here below. And how many are there? Tricarpellary, 3 carpels are there, tricarpellary, and we are representing inside the bracket. So it is syncarpus. So this is the unisexual, that is the staminate flower and the pistillate flower. In the next class, we will study about 2 different families with the floral diagram and floral formula. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.